We talk some football news from around the league right now with a man who represents our Honda Insider Report, as well as Sports Illustrated with a fresh MMQB. Good to see you, Albert.
Good to see you too, Rich.
11 training camps you've been to now.
That's right, 12 teams, 11 training camps. I'll probably wind up, I want to get close to 20 by the end of next week.
Well, you're going to Arizona today.
Yep.
As soon as you're done here, you're heading in right around the corner of LAX, you're taking off.
That's right.
Okay, so you were in Dallas yesterday.
Yep.
What's the latest with Zeke? What are you hearing?
So I think that the Cowboys are willing to pay him close to or more than Todd Gurley. Like, they're willing to replicate the contract. What they're not willing to do is blow up the market the way the Gurley contract blew up the market last year. And I think with all of these guys, it's complicated, but with all of these guys, with Dak, they're willing to go over 30. With Amari, I think they're willing to pay him in the top 5 at his position. And with Zeke, I think they're willing to go where the Rams went with Todd Gurley. The thing is, they've done such a good job drafting. There are other guys they've got to take care of too. Byron Jones is turned into a pretty good corner. Jalen Smith, great story at linebacker. Stephen Jones told me yesterday, this is as deep a team as he's had since the 90s. And
I'm not, by the way, I would back that up.
Yeah.
Normally we always joke about the hyperbole from the Jones family. Certainly last year when they were talking about how close they were to the Rams offense, and a lot of people are like, really funny. You know, Tavon Austin is the only thing that you could possibly replicate it. They're not. I think they're Super Bowl worthy if everybody's happy and paid and ready and healthy.
And his whole point was, we're not trying to save money for the franchise. He's like, we want to take care of everybody. And at the same time, he acknowledges not Zeke's job or Dak's job or Amari's job to manage our cap. And so that's sort of the hard thing. I think right now they view all of these guys, and Zeke's issue, I think, was that he's not in a contract year because they got the 5th-year option on him the way Amari or Dak are. So Zeke was sort of number 3 on the list. And Zeke holding out is him trying to push to number 1 on the list. And so I think ideally you'd like to get the quarterback done first because it's the biggest piece of the puzzle. It's going to be the biggest contract. But I think right now, a month out from the season, they still view this as part of the process.
Well, I think they should give a quarterback first because, as you say, he's crucial. But he's also there.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to, that's something you need to do to, at some point, just a little bit, tell the rest of your team, like, if you want to talk turkey, you got to be in here. That said, Zeke is that important. They've got it. They have to pay him. They have to get him in week 1 for the Giants with the Redskins right behind him. Those are 2 crucial games if you want to win your division right off the bat.
Sometimes I think it matters which order you pay guys in, right? Like, because the locker room is paying attention to who you're paying. And this is where I think some of Zeke's off-field stuff comes into play.
Of course.
Where I think the locker room pays attention to that stuff. I remember talking to Scott McCloughan about this when he was with the Redskins. And, Trent Williams had some issues. They intentionally paid Ryan Kerrigan first because they want to send that message to the locker room. And I think that's something that could come into play here too, is Dak has done everything right. Ever since he got into the pros, he's done absolutely everything right, been an A-plus leader for them. And so maybe it makes sense for them with a young locker room. We're going to send the message of paying Dak, and then we can take care of everybody else. Plus, I think it makes it easier to pay everybody else when you know what that biggest piece of the puzzle looks like.
So you think all 3 are taken care of by the time they break camp in Oxnard in a couple of weeks, or they're all 3 are taken care of by the time week 1 starts?
I don't think the Amari Cooper negotiation is as active as the other 2.
Okay.
I think there's a good chance one or both of Dak and Zeke get done. I'd be a little more surprised if Amari Cooper gets done. I think their intention is to keep him long term. The negotiation just hasn't been as active.
They got to get both, don't they? They have to get Dak and Zeke. I mean, Zeke's not coming back from Cabo without a deal. Although I mentioned on Friday's show, the television audience missed it because we were just radio only, that the reason why maybe the Joneses are sitting back in any way, shape, or form, period, is that their leverage swings back more in Dallas's way as Zeke gets closer to missing an actual paycheck in week 1.
Right. There's no question about that. The other thing I think you have to pay attention to here, if you're Zeke, right? Think about it this way. If the Rams have to pay Todd Gurley now, right? If the Rams and Gurley decided to table things last summer, say it didn't work out, and now we have all the information now, like we have all that information now, and what happens with his knee, do you think they pay him? So Zeke's looking at that and saying, I don't know if I can risk going back out there, just because of the way players at my position are paid and because of what I just saw with another premier player at my position. And the flip side of that is, the Cowboys, I think, want to build some protections into the contract. So those are all things they've got to work through. I'm with you. I think the real sort of tension point is week 1. I don't think we're there yet. And I think when we get closer to the start of the season, that's when you start to see, okay, like this is the Cowboys' real best offer, and this is how far Zeke is really willing to come down.
Albert Breer from the MMQB joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show on the Honda Insider Report. So you stopped by the Chargers. What's the conversation about Melvin Gordon down with the Chargers?
I think they're dug in. I mean, they made him an offer. They think it's a fair offer. It's right around $10 million a year. I would say with inflation, it's probably similar to what Devontae Freeman got in Atlanta last year. Melvin Gordon obviously sees himself as a better player than that. And I think it's sort of one of those where it's like caught in the complication, where you got this huge gap between what Todd Gurley got and then like what Le'Veon Bell wanted but failed to get. And then there's what everybody else has been getting, And so the Gurley contract became such an outlier. Well, now you've got this huge gap. It's a little bit like a few years ago, Calvin Johnson had a contract that was way bigger than any other receiver. Mm-hmm. And so it was like this middle ground that teams had a hard time like slotting their receivers into. With Melvin Gordon, I think they feel like they've got a fair offer out there to him, but I think the Gurley thing, the Gurley contract, especially because Gurley's in the same draft class as him, kind of poisons it a little bit.
Well, it's amazing. The Gurley contract really screwed with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I mean, Le'Veon Bell, who was here on the show in hour number 2, clearly, saw that and had an issue with the way the Steelers were even approaching him. Well, and then obviously Zeke, obviously Gordon. So it's smart that the Rams went ahead and, if they can afford it, went ahead and did it, right? If they ascribe that much value to
I mean, like, look, I think Gurley to me is like Gurley and Zeke. I think are in like almost a different category than Bell. Not that they're that much better players than Bell, but their teams are so reliant on them. And I think so much of Dak being able to contribute at a young age and Goff's renaissance, like those two things, I think were so dependent on the back, and that gave those players leverage, And so I think in the Rams situation, they got to a Super Bowl in large part because of what Todd Gurley did from September to November and what he did to revitalize the franchise. And so I don't think it was a mistake to pay a guy like that because you're getting so much mileage out of him. Who cares what everybody else makes? You got so much mileage out of the guy who's the offensive player of the year for you. And, you sign him early. So you know what that means? You're going to get to the non-guaranteed years a little earlier. And so you're going to have some more flexibility a little earlier than you might otherwise.
Well, and before we move to the quarterbacks, what about Gurley? What in the hell happened to his knee last year? And then what can we expect of him this year?
Yeah.
What did you hear when you stopped by with the Rams?
It was interesting because I talked to a couple of teams before I went there, and we were just you just talk about different things going on in the league, and Gurley's name would come up. Mm-hmm. What I found pretty consistently was most teams had what they'd call a longevity grade on Gurley coming out of Georgia. And this is sort of similar, and not as serious a case, but sort of similar. Remember Miles Jack coming out a couple of years ago?
And he fell into the second round.
And the question is like how long he's going to last, right? It's like, is this a one contract guy? And that was the question with Gurley coming out. And so, I think it's something that sort of hovered over his career. 2 years ago, and you remember Jeff Fisher's last year there wasn't a great year for Todd Gurley. They really felt like that year he sort of lacked confidence in the scheme. Like maybe he was dealing with a little pain.
You think when he called it a high school offense, he was lacking a little confidence in the scheme, Albert?
There was some weird. There was some weird stuff going on there.
Right.
And I think a big part of Gurley's game is how decisive he runs, how hard he runs, all of that. And he just sort of grew this reputation that year. It's like when he really doesn't trust something, like all of a sudden he turns into a different player. I think the Rams felt like that was part of the equation. Yeah, he was hurting last year.
He wasn't trusting his own knee.
But there was like maybe a little bit of a trust issue there. And so getting him back to the point where he's the same confident player, again, I think is a big deal for the Rams.
Okay, so do we expect him to at least attempt to make him the bell cow? And obviously I'm asking this infused with a lot of interested fantasy observers as well. Like what sort of...
I think they're going to platoon him more. Like I think they're going. I think the goal now is to get the most out of him, and I'm not sure that they believe getting the most out of him anymore means giving him the ball 25 times a game
in September and October.
Right. I think that look, they match on Malcolm Brown. That was a low. There's not a ton of money there, but they matched on a restricted free agent running back, Malcolm Brown, who signed an offer sheet with the Lions, so he's back, and they draft Darrell Henderson, who they love. And this was, more a case of them. It wasn't drafting a position. They just liked the player that much. Like Sean McVay liked that player that much, said that's a guy who totally fits what we do. And so I think because they've got Brown back And now they bring in Darrell Henderson, who they can do different things with out of the backfield, and will be like sort of a fun weapon for Sean McVay to have. They've now got the flexibility to execute, I think, more of a platoon with Todd Gurley, which ultimately allow him to get more out of Gurley long term.
MMQB senior reporter Albert Breer here in the Honda Insider Report. Let's get to the quarterback senior conversation you had with Phillip Rivers. The floor is yours. What happened?
It was really interesting because I've had these conversations with him the last couple of years, and he always said, I remember him saying to me last year, he's like, oh, Drew and Tom, they talk about playing to 45. You can have that. Like, I don't want that, right? And so, he said, he's consistently said, I probably have a handful of years left. And so now it was, I'm sort of year to year now. He's in the last year of his contract, so that's a question. To me, what was most interesting was his long-term goal, which was, I'm not one of these guys who's scared of being done playing. I'm excited about what I'm going to do next. I'm going to coach high school football, and I want to coach my son. So while he was saying he was year to year, he was like, my oldest son, Gunner, is a fifth grade quarterback right now.
Fifth grade
quarterback.
Oh, okay. So we're talking 4 more years anyway. I mean, that means he would play to Tom Brady's current age right now.
But not to 45 like Brady and Tom have talked about. Like, so he sort of put a timeline on himself there, and he said, and I don't want to be hustling out to go coach him either. Like, I want to have a natural retirement and then just kind of get into coaching and coach my kid. And because, his dad was a high school football coach, his high school football coach.
That's great.
And so he wants to give his kid the experience that he had growing up. I thought it was a really cool thing because, I think with a lot of these guys, like I think if Brady's being honest with you, there's a little fear there of what's next because he loves what he does so much and he's so competitive and all of that, right? And I think with a lot of athletes, the way it is, it was kind of cool to talk to Phillip Rivers saying, no, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Like, he knows what his offense is going to look like. Like, he and his brother have talked about how, we're going to be a mix of what we did with Norv and what we're doing now.
When he's a coach,
When he's a coach, yeah. And so he has like this whole offense laid out that he's going to run in the high school, at the high school level. And yeah, his son, I mean, I guess we can talk to the people at Michigan, the people at Ohio State. Now, Gunner Rivers, I think, will be class of 2027, something like that.
Give him some sort of early recognition right now. Why not?
Yeah.
Pull a Lane Kiffin, right? So, okay, break down Brady's contract for me, Albert Breer.
Yeah,
what is that?
I would just tell you, so the way you want to look at this, it would have cost them $70 million to tag him twice over the next 2 years. So that's the new money in the deal. They give him an $8 million raise now, and then that $8 million comes out of the next 2 years. So instead of having to tag him in 2020 and 2021, they've got these non-guaranteed years there that'll, I think the way it was explained to me, it's going to allow both teams to make a conscious decision each year on how they want to go forward. And I think that they're sort of leaning on the Brady-Kraft relationship here, knowing like we'll be able to work this out one way or another. And I know it sounds like, oh, well, it's year to year and like this, like doom is looming over this whole thing. I haven't gotten the sense it's that way at all. It's more just like, look, if someone changes their mind, we've got flexibility here.
Of course. And it also appears to be the first instance of we found somebody who is not being gotten rid of before the end of his supposed usefulness. That's been always a hallmark of the Patriot way, if you will,
right? Is
to make sure that you're moving on before the circumstances force it, right?
Yeah, and what's so interesting about it to me is like we all look at, like, I think everybody like last year was looking for the Favre, the Peyton Manning, like sort of fall off a cliff where you can see it, right? Well, I think what the Patriots have prepared for is like, what if this is John Elway? Where John Elway in 96, 97, 98 was still a good player, but maybe he wasn't the guy he was in 88 where he could carry a whole team, right?
Or how about this? We've never seen this before, that there is no comparison to what we're seeing. Right. That this is a 42-year-old guy freshly on Saturday, turning 42, same day that my wife had a birthday. And Marv Levy, that we have never seen a 42-year-old like this, and that there will be a 43-year-old guy getting set for preseason action, looking for a new deal that you have to pay because of what the 42-year-old guy looked like, and then the 44-year-old guy will sit there and go, you know what? we either just won a Super Bowl or made it as far as the AFC Championship game. And I just, I think I want to keep playing. Like, that we won't see that precipitous fall off with a deep throw or anything like that. That we have never seen anything. It's possible.
Yeah.
Right?
And we don't know. Like this thing.
Right.
But we didn't know with Favre. We didn't know what Manning. Manning had happened,
But I think you just assumed it was gonna happen at least at some point with that guy. I mean, with Brady.
With Brady, I mean, like I'm past the point. Yeah, I'm past the point
I'm
of
way
like
past that point.
I'm past the point of like waiting for the bottom to drop out. Like I think the Elway scenario is more likely, right? Like I think the Elway scenario is more likely where maybe you start to see, like maybe it looks a little different. But I just think I don't know. I just think he has a way of figuring it out. Like he'll figure, like if he loses a little arm strength, I think he'll figure it out. Like I think he'll figure out how to play a little differently. And I think what's interesting is you see the way the team's built differently now. Everybody's getting smaller, right? Like the spread offenses now. You got 220-pound linebackers out there, 250-pound defensive ends. Well, what would the inefficiency be? The inefficiency would be no one's got size or girth up front anymore. So what do? You do what the Patriots did last year. You draft the 220-pound running back in the first round. You have a fullback on the roster, and you come out with 2 tight ends and 2 running backs and win the Super Bowl out of that formation. And in a way, like Belichick being able to play that inefficiency, right, plays right into being able to support Brady. Because if you're playing offense that way, it makes it a little bit easier to support an older quarterback. It's like what Terrell Davis did for John Elway all those years ago.
Before I let you go, Albert Breer, the best team you've seen, a third of the league. Best, deepest. Look, everybody looks great now. Everybody feels like they got a 12-win season in them. I understand that.
Yeah.
But in terms of roster size, deep, sensibility in the locker room.
Yeah.
Coaching staff, of the 11 teams that you've eyeballed, which would you say, you know what, that's the one that I think is...
The Saints. I just like, and part of it's going to depend on the same thing the Patriots are depending on, which is an older quarterback keeping his game where it needs to be. But that Saints team, I don't think that they've got a hole. Like I don't think there's a hole in that roster. They're very strong and deep at corner. They're strong and deep on the offensive line. Those are 2 areas where a lot of teams have problems and are very, very important in the NFL today. And I just, I look at the receiver group around Drew Brees, what Jared Cook's going to be able to do.
Right.
Michael Thomas, what he's become. Alvin Kamara, the weapon out of the backfield. They've done such a nice job. And I think that this isn't a little bit of an underplayed story. They've drafted so well the last 3 or 4 years. And the roster now is in such good shape. And I think it's capable of, put it this way, like when I sat down with Sean Payton and Drew Brees the other day, I got the feeling that they feel like this team's better than the 2009 team that won the Super Bowl. And it's really going to be up to them to get the team to where it needs to be. But they've been knocking on the door, man. They've been right there. And losing the way they did the last 2 years, the players.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, lightning struck twice the last 2 times.
Yeah.
And plus they've got a coaching staff with headed up by a guy who's won it before. Mm-hmm. And there's no turnover. You're right. They may have 0 holes when it comes down to it.
I like when I was out there, I mean, so they lose Max Unger, right? Their center, great center for Seattle for all those years. Eric McCoy looks great as a rookie at that position. Opposite Marshawn Lattimore, they've been looking for a corner. Eli Apple, who didn't have his option exercise, has actually looked pretty good in camp. They've got depth, in the secondary, which you need in today's NFL. It's one of these teams that's just very balanced across the board. So as long as Drew Brees can continue to be Drew Brees, which again, like now that I guess it's not unprecedented anymore, there's one precedent for it. It's Brady. But, if Brees can be Brees at 40 years old, I think the Saints have a chance to be right back where they've been the last 2 years, right at the doorstep.
I just realized this. I'm sure the Saints have the most Ohio State players on the roster of any team in the NFL. It's really odd that you would choose them.
That's what I meant by they've drafted well.
That's great.
They've drafted well. Good stock.
Ask him the poll question before we send him up the road to LAX so he can get his flight to Cardinals camp later on today.
Yeah, Albert, which quarterback would you want for the next 3 years? Brady, Brees, Rivers, Roethlisberger.
Brady, Brees.
Next 3 years, now that Brady is supposedly under contract.
No, Brady.
It's tough, right?
I like all the other guys. The other guys are good players. It's got to be Brady, right?
Yeah, Brady 43% right now leads the way.
And that puts him at what, 44 would be the third year?
He would go through his entire third year of this 44. Deal as a 44-year-old man.
Okay, yeah. Because this one brings him right up to the 45th birthday, which is actually his what he said is his goal.
That's his goal.
Yeah.
All of us here at the Rich Eisen Show are genuinely concerned. We're sending you out of here with sunscreen. Albert, are you are you applying sunscreen?
I don't need sunscreen. I don't need sunscreen.
You don't.
Oh,
No.
gosh.
You don't.
It's
I think
my
you do.
greatest skill is my ability to tan. I told you guys
It's
that.
unbelievable.
It's really sad.
It's
but
unbelievable.
But one day the tide will turn. We're genuinely concerned for you. I mean, you are a ridiculous shade of tan right now. It's just a mix of it's in a good way. I mean, I guess you're mix of Nantucket, Southern California, the great Midwestern camps that you visited.
Yeah.
A little bit of New Orleans.
Got a lot of
sunshine.
sun.
Good to see you.
You don't wear a hat.
I
or
get a
visor
participation
or
trophy
anything?
for coming out too.
Sure, why not?
You guys got one for me?
Albert Breer loves it. We won't give it to you. You just smash it into pieces so you can get your clicks on @Albert Breer and also Albert_Breer on Instagram. Great stuff as always.
All right, thanks, Rich.
And you can go check out MMQB.com because it's not the MMQB, right?
The MMQB.com.
It is the MMQB.com.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
because I want to make sure it's the MMQB.com because when you go to another one, it's completely different.
Never forget the.
Never forget the. Oh,
The.
Oh my gosh, I just walked into that one.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.